After Linda and James moved into their new home on the outskirts of town, their lives began to take on a completely new rhythm, unfamiliar to them before. The house, surrounded by a forest and a field, became a real refuge for them, where only their own atmosphere reigned and where the noise and condemnation of society did not penetrate. Here, in the midst of nature, and far from anything that could remind them of the past, they felt that they could finally be themselves, build their future in peace and confidence. Every morning began with the fact that they cooked breakfast together. The ritual became important to them, and they found new joys in it every time. James woke up earlier and brewed coffee, the aroma of which filled the house. Linda, still a little sleepy, would come into the kitchen and always find him ready and waiting for her. James watched with a smile as she took her first cup of coffee and slowly came back to life. Their morning conversations were light and warm. They usually discussed plans for the day, little things like fixing the closet or buying new dishes for the kitchen. These conversations didn't seem to contain anything meaningful, but they seemed to pave the way for greater understanding and intimacy. At such moments, both felt that they could talk about everything in the world without thinking about what they would think about them. The house gradually began to fill with things that reflected their life together. Linda enthusiastically set about creating comfort. She decided that the small garden behind the house could become her place of strength and peace. James supported her wish and helped prepare the land for planting. Now every morning they checked together how the flowers were growing, admired the new shoots that became a symbol of their future together. Together they organized the interior spaces of the house. James was happy to help with the rearrangement of furniture. They laughed, moving heavy cabinets and discussing how best to organize the rooms. This house became something special for them, not just a place to live, but a real corner of happiness and love. At first, Linda still felt anxious and afraid that their future might collapse, but seeing how James was investing in their common space, she gradually began to believe that everything would really be fine. Linda began to arrange little evenings at home for the two of them, when they turned off their phones and treated each other to cooked meals. James was surprised by her culinary talent. Every attempt she made to cook something new ended in fun and warmth. He increasingly felt happy here, in their small world, realizing that he would not trade this life for any other. However, despite everything they did together, Linda still couldn't completely get rid of her inner worries. One evening, when they were sitting by the fireplace together after a long day, she decided for the first time to start a conversation about her fears and doubts, hoping that James would understand her and perhaps dispel her anxiety.
James, I often think about how it would have been if things had turned out differently. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm just trying to be someone who can match you in this house. But I'm not sure I can do it.
Linda, you sound like you need to prove something. You don't have to show anything or try to match anyone, even me. I chose to be here with you not because you have to prove something to me, but because I love you. That's quite enough.
But isn't that so? James, have you always liked the active life in the city? The dynamics, the busy weekdays? You were successful and aspired to something more. I'm always afraid that in this small house with this quiet life you'll get bored, that you'll need more than I can give you.
More? Linda, I don't need any more. You're talking about the past, but it was me at another time, in another place. Now I have what I've always been looking for, and this is not an office or the frenzied rhythm of the city. It's you. It's the silence in the morning, it's a cozy home, it's the moments we spend together.
I'm afraid to believe it. Sometimes it seems like it's a dream, that everything is too good to be true. As if all this could disappear if I relaxed and allowed myself to believe in our future.
Linda, don't be afraid. I've lost too, I've been alone too, and I know what it feels like to feel that the whole world can disappear in an instant. But we are here, and we have everything to be happy. Isn't it worth believing in?
I want to believe. But the fear of losing that happiness again is getting too strong. Sometimes I'm even afraid to rejoice, as if it would attract trouble. It's like I'm not worthy to be here with you.
Listen, I want you to know one thing: this house and this life mean everything to me precisely because they are with you. You are more to me than all fears, than all doubts. You're real to me. Don't try to conform. Don't think about the past. Don't be afraid to lose the future. We have this moment, and it's the real thing.
I understand, James, really. I try. Sometimes you say things like that, and it makes me feel better, but then again there comes a moment when everything comes back, and it seems to me that this piece is deceptive.
So let me help you, Linda. We can do it together. And this house is our refuge, not just walls and a roof. Here you can be yourself, here no one will dare to judge you. Isn't that what you wanted?
Yes, that's what I wanted. Maybe I just haven't gotten used to the fact that happiness can be so simple and calm. Perhaps you should learn to accept it and not be afraid of losing it.
Exactly. Just be yourself. And remember, I will always be here with you. We've both been through too much to doubt each other now.
They sat by the fireplace for a long time, hugging each other, enjoying the warmth of the fire and their privacy. Linda felt something bright begin to break through in her soul, as if James's words had warmed her from the inside. She couldn't deny that her fears were still with her, but now she knew that next to him she had a chance for the peaceful life she had been afraid of for so long. It's been a few weeks since Linda and James moved into their new home. Despite James' efforts to support her, Linda was still struggling with internal fears that were eating away at her confidence in their future. Every time she saw James busy with household chores or projects, smiling, she felt not joy, but a strange uneasiness. Her anxiety reminded her of past mistakes, and that uncertainty grew, filling her mind. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to give James what he deserved, that her past and her own doubts were dragging them down. She tried to hide her feelings, not wanting James to know that she was tormented by such thoughts, but every little thing, every innocent moment made her wonder if she was worthy of this whole new life. One morning, when James had gone on business, Linda was sitting by the window, looking thoughtfully at the garden. At first everything seemed perfect to her, but now she couldn't get rid of the feeling that this idyll was an illusion that was about to collapse. She was haunted by the feeling that sooner or later she would lose this peace. Self-confidence did not come, despite all efforts. Linda tried to take care of the garden and arranged everything at home in her own way, but this only temporarily distracted her from deep inner worries. She was afraid that one day it would all become a burden for James, which he would decide to get rid of. In the evening, when James returned home, he immediately noticed that Linda was not in the best mood. She became a little withdrawn, and her smile no longer seemed so easy and natural to him. At first he thought it was just a temporary mood, fatigue from household chores, but as her isolation continued, he began to wonder if there was something deeper behind it. James decided to talk to Linda, realizing that if he didn't find out what was bothering her, it could become a real problem for their relationship. That evening after dinner, they were both sitting in the living room when James started a frank conversation, hoping that Linda would share her feelings with him.
Linda, I feel like something's bothering you. I see how thoughtful and detached you are often. I want to understand what's going on. You know you can trust me, right?
James, me. I don't even know how to explain it. It's probably just my thoughts. All this, a new life, a new home. Sometimes it seems to me that I myself do not fully believe that this can continue.
Why do you think that? What makes you doubt? We've been through a lot, and now we have a chance for a peaceful, happy life. Why can't you accept it?
It's not about you, James. It's about me. I've always been unsure of myself, afraid that I wouldn't live up to expectations. When I see how you invest in all this, how you take care of us, it seems to me that I am not worthy of all this. It's like there's this fear stuck in my head that I'm only hindering you, limiting you.
Linda, but this is our common choice. I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to. You are my family, and it is with you that I want to live this life. I chose to be here, and that's what makes me happy.
But you could have had more. More than this solitude, than this life where we hardly communicate with other people. You've always been so active, so cheerful. And now, sometimes I think you're just here because of your promise or because you feel like you should be around.
Linda, do you really think so? Do you think I stayed here on duty? That's not so. I chose you, and I continue to choose you every day. For me, this life is the best choice, and I don't want to change it for anything else. Can't you see that this place, this house, and this silence make me really happy?
I'm trying to believe it, really, but I still can't get rid of the feeling that I don't deserve this happiness. Sometimes it seems to me that it's all too good to be true. It's like I'm threatening us with my anxiety.
You don't have to feel guilty about what we have, Linda. This is not a dream or an illusion. We're here because that's what we decided. And I'm always there to remind you of that. You don't have to fight your fears alone.
Maybe I'm just thinking too much. Everything seems so fragile to me, as if one wrong move and everything will collapse. I don't want to lose you again, James, but sometimes the fears become so strong that I lose my sense of reality.
Listen, Linda, Everything that happened before is behind us. This fear, this feeling that you are unworthy of happiness, is just a shadow of the past. But I'm not going to let this shadow rule our lives. I'm here, and I'm staying here. We are together. So if you're scared, tell me, don't be silent. We'll get through this together, no matter how difficult it is.
You always know what to say. Thanks. Sometimes I feel like you're the one keeping us afloat, and I'm just drowning in my worries.
Linda, you're not alone in this, and you're not drowning at all. You're stronger than you think. And to be honest, your concern, your willingness to talk about your feelings is what makes us closer. I know you're scared, but I'm always there for you. Isn't that enough?
I guess I just need to learn to trust you and myself. I'm always afraid that the past will catch up with us, that happiness will disappear as soon as I accept it. But maybe I should just give us a chance.
Exactly. Give us a chance, Linda. We deserve to be happy, and no one can take that away. Only we can build or destroy our lives by ourselves. I'm not just here because I have to. I'm here because I want it more than anything.
Linda felt her anxiety gradually subside. She understood that James was sincere in his words, that he was ready to support her, no matter how difficult her inner world was. She realized that her fears should not control their future, that they can only be a reminder of the past, and not a shadow overshadowing the present. After their conversation, Linda felt that her soul was finally finding peace. She decided to try to believe not only in James, but also in herself. That night she fell asleep with a feeling that their love could withstand even her own doubts. Linda and James's life in their secluded house on the outskirts of the town gradually became measured. They created their own cozy world where they took care of each other and enjoyed their privacy. However, their relationship was destined to go through a new test when a figure from James' past suddenly appeared in their lives. One day, when James went into town to buy groceries, he accidentally bumped into a familiar face at a local cafe. It was Caroline, his old friend and colleague from his previous job, with whom they had once been close. Their relationship never crossed the boundaries of friendship, but they spent a lot of time together working on projects and discussing plans. James liked her sense of humor, energy, and ability to support in difficult times. After he moved in, the connection with Caroline gradually weakened, and they stopped communicating. Now, standing in front of her, James felt a wave of nostalgia for the days when life was full of energy and possibilities. Caroline was also glad to meet him, and they enthusiastically began to remember past times. In the conversation, James mentioned that he moved to this city with Linda and now works remotely. Caroline listened to him with interest and offered to meet again to discuss life, work, and just spend time together as before. The next day they met at a cafe, and the conversation really brought back memories of the carefree years when everything seemed simpler to James. Caroline talked about her new projects, her travels, and how her life has changed over the past few years. James found himself thinking that it was always easy with her, because there were no obligations or complicated emotions between them. He just liked listening to her stories and sharing his own without thinking about the consequences. Caroline inspired him to reflect on the past. She talked about her experience of running her own business, how she found a path to freedom and independence, and how she developed her projects despite the difficulties. James listened to her with interest and even began to think about the possibility of his own business. He liked that her words filled him with confidence and lightness, and he felt that it could help him in his new life. Meeting Caroline, which reminded James of his former life, seemed to James nothing more than a pleasant conversation with a friend. However, for Linda, this appearance from the past turned out to be a serious test. When James mentioned meeting Caroline, Linda felt a strange unease that she couldn't explain. Although James assured her that Caroline was just a friend with whom he shared a common past, Linda could not get rid of jealousy and a sense of threat. It seemed that their secluded world, which she had so carefully built with James, was suddenly in question. Every time James mentioned meeting Caroline, Linda felt a growing sense of insecurity. She couldn't completely trust these words, because they awakened her old fears, the fear of losing James and being alone again. Her anxiety grew, and she began to notice more and more how James was becoming detached. He began to spend more time in the city, and when he returned, he looked thoughtful and sometimes was lost in his own thoughts. This increased her anxiety, making Linda feel superfluous in their relationship, as if the possible loss of everything she had gained with him was already looming on the horizon. Linda began to notice that James was changing, as if his thoughts were now elsewhere. This worry slowly turned into a fear that their happiness might disappear. She began to doubt her place in his life, because it seemed to her that she was not able to give him what Caroline could offer: lightness, confidence, and inspiration. Everything she saw in their relationship seemed far-fetched to her, as if their idyll was only temporary, as if with the advent of Caroline, James suddenly realized that his life with Linda might not be what he imagined it to be. Linda found herself thinking more and more often that she shouldn't have hoped for a happy life, that maybe she had never been good enough for James. These thoughts began to poison her daily routine, making her increasingly withdrawn and silent. Her attempts to hide her feelings turned out to be the heaviest burden for her, because every meeting between James and Caroline was perceived by her as proof of her insecurity and weakness. James noticed how Linda was becoming more and more distant, but he couldn't figure out what exactly was causing her to feel this way. He tried to support her, surrounded her with care, but his efforts were in vain. It seemed that all his words only increased her distrust. Linda avoided discussing Caroline's topic and pretended that everything was fine, although her behavior suggested otherwise. She felt that telling James about her jealousy would make her even more vulnerable, and she was afraid that he would not understand her fears. Meanwhile, James's meetings with Caroline continued, and each time he returned home with new thoughts and ideas. He thought about implementing his own project, finding something that would bring him not only income, but also pleasure. Caroline inspired him to new achievements, made him remember who he used to be. These conversations with her reminded James of his old ambitions, that he was once driven by dreams and aspired to achieve his goals. Plans began to form in James's head that he thought could improve his life in the town. But Linda increasingly felt like an outsider in these plans. It seemed to her that every new conversation with Caroline distanced James from her, that they were starting to live in different worlds again. She saw him thinking about his career, and it made her feel sick. Her fears that their happiness might disappear became more and more real. She began to believe that it was she who was limiting James, that her inadequacy, her insecurity, were pulling him back, depriving him of the chance for the real life he dreamed of. With each passing day, Linda became more withdrawn into herself, and James became more and more immersed in his ideas. He sincerely wanted to make their lives better, to put his strength into something important, but did not notice how it affected Linda. He did not understand that her silence and isolation were the result of her inner struggle, which she waged with herself every day. Her feelings, her jealousy and insecurity, all turned into a silent conflict that destroyed her from the inside. Linda began to avoid the time when James was at home, finding solace in long walks and gardening. Her fears and jealousy became an insurmountable barrier for her, and she increasingly felt superfluous in his life. She couldn't share her feelings with him. She didn't want him to see her weakness. It seemed to her that her worries would make her even less worthy of James, and she continued to carry this burden alone. Caroline's return to James's life was for Linda a kind of blow to their relationship, a reminder that their world, no matter how hard she tried to protect it, is not indestructible. She began to believe that maybe James was destined to be with someone who could support his ambitions and share his dreams. Her jealousy, her doubts slowly began to destroy the trust that she had been trying to restore for so long. In the end, Linda realized that her fears and jealousy of Caroline had become an insurmountable obstacle for her. She began to think that perhaps their new life, their solitude in this house, was not the real reality, but only her attempt to hide from society and keep James. Her anxiety grew every day, and she realized that sooner or later she would have to face this reality and make a decision whether she was ready to fight for her relationship or let James go for his freedom. Caroline's appearance in James's life stirred up everything that had been hidden in Linda's soul for so long. With each passing day, her doubts and jealousy intensified, turning the internal conflict into a real emotional chaos. And her fears, which at first seemed only a temporary weakness, now filled her thoughts, forming a firm belief that she would not be able to keep James, that his life would be more fulfilling and brighter without her. Everything that had seemed solid and stable before began to crumble under the onslaught of her inner anxiety. At first, Linda tried to cope with anxiety by convincing herself that her jealousy of Caroline was unfounded. She kept telling herself that James had chosen her, that they had chosen this life together and built a house together. However, with each new meeting between James and Caroline, these beliefs lost their strength more and more. James returned home with enthusiasm and new ideas, and there was a spark in his eyes that Linda saw less and less often next to her. As if under the influence of meetings with Caroline, he was getting a second wind, remembering old dreams, and Linda realized that she would never be able to give him the lightness and confidence that this woman brought him. Gradually, their life together began to lose its harmony. Until recently, Linda and James could enjoy little things together, laugh and discuss the future, but now their conversations were getting shorter, and the moments of silence between them were getting longer and more intense. Linda kept to herself, trying to avoid topics related to James's plans, his ambitions, and even more so meetings with Caroline. It hurt her to see him blossom after these meetings, and she didn't want to make him feel guilty with her doubts and jealousy. She was increasingly left alone, taking long walks in the garden or sitting in her room, surrounded by quiet thoughts and vulnerable hopes. Her inner monologue became more and more acute and self-critical. Linda began to convince herself that she was superfluous in James's life, that her insecurities and fears were only pulling him back. It seemed to her that she had become a kind of anchor that prevented him from moving forward. James's meetings with Caroline became a symbol for her that she could not give him the support he deserved. James, although he noticed the changes in Linda's behavior, could not understand the true reasons for her detachment. He saw that she was becoming more and more withdrawn, showing less and less joy and initiative, but he believed that this was a temporary condition or the result of fatigue. He tried to diffuse the situation to surround her with care, but he did not understand how deeply rooted doubts and insecurities were in her. Sometimes it seemed to him that Linda was trying to avoid him altogether, as if she was hiding something or afraid to tell him. Every morning began with a feeling of a taut string. Linda was cooking breakfast, doing the usual things, but her movements became uncertain and constrained, as if she expected something bad. She tried her best to hide her feelings, hoping that her anxiety would pass, but her heart was getting heavier every day. James's words, his support and attention stopped bringing her peace, because now only fears and jealousy lived in her head. James, on the other hand, increasingly left the house in search of inspiration and support for his new project, which began to take shape in his thoughts. He dreamed that he could start a new business, even a small one, but his own, capable of bringing joy and benefit. In his head, these ideas were connected with the image of Caroline, her support and stories about how she herself began her journey. It gave him confidence and encouraged him to take action. However, he did not realize that every meeting he had with Caroline, every word about her projects, turned into painful injections for Linda, awakening her old fears. Linda watched James return with new ideas and became increasingly convinced that she had become for him not an inspiration, but a painful reminder of the past. It seemed to her that despite all his efforts to support her, he was finding less and less joy in their life together. Her thoughts grew darker and darker, and she began to lose faith that their relationship could withstand this test. She felt lonely, even though James was there. Her doubts, her jealousy began to destroy her inner world, and even little things like his smile or compliment no longer brought her comfort. Linda withdrew into herself so much that it became difficult for her to express her feelings. It was difficult to talk about what was bothering her. The same thoughts were spinning in her head that she was an obstacle to his happiness, that their common life no longer brought him joy, that he would eventually leave for someone who could support his dreams, inspire and give lightness. James felt an invisible wall forming between them, but he couldn't figure out where it came from. He often tried to talk to Linda, to find out what was bothering her, but each time he came across silence or evasive answers. It seemed to him that Linda was hiding something important, that she might not trust him or no longer feel the same feelings for him as before. He tried to distract her, to suggest doing something new, but Linda increasingly refused, preferring to be alone. For Linda, every day was a challenge. Her thoughts weighed on her like a heavy weight that she couldn't get rid of. She began to avoid James's gaze, to avoid conversations that might touch on her fears. She felt that she could no longer pretend that everything was okay, but at the same time she was afraid to reveal her feelings, fearing that it would destroy their last threads of trust. Every night Linda fell asleep thinking that their happy life was coming to an end. She felt that her insecurity was gradually destroying everything they had built together for so long. She wanted to find a way to overcome her fears, but she didn't know where to start. Her jealousy and feelings of inferiority became an insurmountable barrier for her, and she increasingly thought that perhaps the best solution for James would be to leave her and leave. James, not knowing how to help Linda, increasingly began to leave home, spending time in the city and meeting with Caroline. In his mind, this was an attempt to distract himself from the tension at home. He sincerely did not understand that his actions only increased Linda's doubts. He felt increasingly confused and didn't know how to deal with her coldness. All this made him more vulnerable to the feelings that Caroline awakened in him. Her support and friendly participation became an outlet for him, a kind of support when Linda closed herself off from him. Linda continued to sink into her worries, closing herself in more and more, and their house, once filled with warmth and comfort, began to turn into a place of tension and innuendo. They became like strangers to each other, despite all the previous promises and the moments they had experienced together. Linda's inner struggle with jealousy and insecurity began to destroy her from the inside, and she became more and more convinced that James would be better off without her. Her silence and detachment left him no chance to understand what was tormenting her, and this invisible wall between them was getting higher every day. In the end, Linda realized that her fears were not just clouding her mind, they were destroying their love and trust. She felt like she couldn't handle it anymore. The situation between Linda and James has come to a boiling point. The tension that had been building between them in recent months had become unbearable, turning their home, which they had once loved so much, into a place of silent suffering and unspoken words. Linda completely withdrew into herself, and James spent more and more time outside the house, trying to find in the world outside their solitude the support and inspiration that he so lacked. Both felt that their lives were bursting at the seams together, but neither dared to be the first to talk about it. Each of them was afraid that frankness could destroy the last remnants of their once strong relationship. Linda could no longer ignore her inner anxiety. Her jealousy, self-doubt, and fear that James would eventually leave for Caroline or just decide to start a new life grew stronger every day. Her anxiety turned into guilt for not being able to create the life he dreamed of for him. Linda was sure that her insufficiency was interfering with their shared happiness, that her own fears were the reason that James began to move away from her. One day, Linda woke up early as usual and, while preparing breakfast, noticed that James did not return home again until late in the evening. This time he didn't even warn her that he would be late. A new wave of despair and disappointment swept over her. She felt that she could no longer fight this feeling of loneliness, which had become a constant companion of her life. Her fears and anxieties could no longer be ignored, and she realized that if she didn't do something now, their relationship would simply collapse completely. On the evening of the same day, James returned home, tired and obviously thoughtful. He looked withdrawn and distant, his thoughts clearly hovering somewhere far from their home. Linda, even more lost and lonely than before, finally decided that she could no longer remain silent. She realized that if she did not tell him about her feelings, then her own doubts and worries would destroy everything that remained of their love. It became clear to her that it was no longer possible to hide her emotions, and that if she wanted to preserve their relationship, she would have to take the risk and open her heart to him. Linda took a long time to collect her thoughts, trying to put her fears and pain into words that James could understand. She didn't want to blame him, but she needed to convey to him that her jealousy of Caroline, her sense of her own uselessness, and the fear of losing him had become unbearable for her. She decided that she would open up to him, even if it led to a breakup, because she understood that this could not go on. Finally, when they were both alone in the living room, Linda gathered her courage and began to talk. She told James how much she was tormented by his relationship with Caroline, how every time he met her, she felt superfluous and unworthy. Linda explained that her jealousy has become a real test for her, that she can no longer cope with it alone. Her confession was filled with pain and despair, which she had been hiding inside for a long time. James listened to her in silence, and with every word she said, he began to understand better why their relationship had become so strained. He realized that his actions, which he considered innocent and even useful, had become for Linda a symbol of her own fears and insecurities. He realized that Caroline, even though she was just a friend to him, had unwittingly turned into a cause of jealousy and pain for Linda. James had no idea how deeply her feelings ran and how much his association with Caroline had affected her. He never thought that his inspiration, gained through Caroline, could be perceived by Linda as her own insufficiency. For Linda, the confession was cathartic. For the first time in a long time, she felt that she no longer carried this heavy burden of doubt and jealousy. She was afraid of James's reaction, but at the same time she felt an inner relief, because now she no longer had to hide her pain. She finally freed herself from her silence and made it clear that what she needed was not confirmation of his love, but confidence that she was more important to him than the past, important memories and all-inspiring meetings with other people. James, realizing the full weight of her confession, felt guilty for being so engrossed in his thoughts and ideas that he did not notice how he had distanced himself from Linda. He realized that his desire for new projects and his meetings with Caroline only aggravated her sense of uselessness and inferiority. And James realized that in the pursuit of new inspiration, he had allowed his ambitions to undermine the foundation of their relationship, forgetting that Linda needed his support and attention. Linda's confession and James' realization of their real problems were the moment of climax. Both had to face the truth and admit that their happiness and unity were on the verge of destruction. James realized that if he did not make efforts to restore their bond, they could lose everything that once made their relationship unique and strong. He realized that for Linda, his attention and support were not just important, but necessary for her to feel confident and calm in their relationship. After a frank conversation, there was finally a long-awaited relief between them. Linda no longer felt alone in her fear, and James, realizing how important his confidence and support were to her, began to rethink his priorities. It became clear to him that all these meetings with Caroline and his desire for new projects were distancing him from the most important thing, their relationship, their world together, which they had so carefully built. Now that there was nothing left unsaid between them, both felt that their love was still alive and that she was able to withstand this test. Linda gained confidence that her fears and jealousy were not an obstacle to their love, but only her own path to understanding and accepting herself. James, in turn, realized that their relationship required constant attention and that his support could be the anchor that would help Linda find inner peace. After this conversation, Linda and James decided to reconsider their lives and approach to relationships. They realized that their love needed sincerity and support, that each of them should feel important and needed. James decided to stop seeing Caroline, realizing that his communication with her was hurting Linda and jeopardizing their future. He realized that success and inspiration were not worth the price they could both pay if he continued to distance himself from Linda. This frank conversation was a turning point for both of them. Linda gained confidence in their relationship after realizing that James still sees her by his side, despite all her fears and doubts. James, on the other hand, found the strength to support Linda and help her cope with internal anxieties, accepting her for who she is. Both realized that their love can overcome any obstacles if they work on their feelings and listen to each other. After the conversation, Linda felt that her heart was finally freed from the burden she had been carrying for so long. She knew that difficulties lay ahead, but now she had the confidence that James would always be there to support her. James, in turn, realized that love requires more than simple promises. It requires sincerity, care, and willingness to sacrifice their desires for the sake of another person. After a frank conversation that finally helped Linda and James understand the depth and complexity of their relationship, a new stage began in their lives. Now there were no innuendos and hidden feelings between them, and every day they tried to fill their common space with understanding, sincerity, and care. Their relationship, once shaky and full of mutual fears, began to find an inner harmony that was previously lacking. The house, which had previously seemed cold and devoid of comfort to Linda, was filled with light and warmth again. Now it was truly their common space, where everyone felt accepted and loved. For the first time in a long time, Linda felt completely free from the worries that had been haunting her for so long. She no longer felt unnecessary or not good enough for James. Their solitude together became for her not just a familiar shelter, but a source of strength and confidence. She no longer questioned herself, no longer looked for flaws in herself. Now Linda could afford to enjoy the moments of joy and peace that had been something out of reach for her for so long. Her heart finally found peace. James, in turn, reconsidered his attitude towards ambitions and his former dreams. He realized that happiness and a fulfilling life lie not only in achievements or successes, but also in the harmony that he found next to Linda. Realizing that his search for inspiration did not justify the suffering that Linda went through, he began to invest strength and energy in their home and relationship together. James began to appreciate even more the simple moments they spent together, realizing that this was his real happiness. Now their days were filled with new, warm rituals that helped them strengthen their bond. James began to help Linda in the garden, and the two of them tended flowers and vegetables, watching how their joint work bore fruit. Each new sprout, each blooming plant symbolized for them the growth and renewal of their love, which, like this garden, required time, care, and patience. Gardening became for them a symbol of the life they decided to build together, carefully and gradually. Evenings at their house became special moments when they could forget about everything and enjoy simple pleasures. Linda and James had dinners on the terrace, watching the sunsets and listening to the sounds of nature. They talked about everything, discussing their plans and dreams, sharing their thoughts without fear of being misunderstood. Linda felt that her fears had disappeared, and now her life with James was filled with true meaning and peace. She no longer lived in anticipation of trouble or disappointment, as it used to be. Now her every day was full of love and acceptance. Over time, the residents of the town stopped paying attention to Linda and James. Those who had previously treated them with suspicion or condemnation now simply accepted them as part of society. Their quiet and modest life on the outskirts became something familiar to others, and the neighbors began to greet them with friendly smiles, without showing the same dissatisfaction or criticism. Linda no longer felt like a stranger in this city. She began to go out for walks, communicate with the locals, and her anxiety about public opinion gradually disappeared. Now she no longer cared what others thought of her, because she found harmony with herself and with James. Over time, James and Linda decided to expand their home by adding several new rooms where they could go about their business. James set up a small workshop for himself, where he worked on projects that were interesting to him and brought joy. Linda, on the other hand, created a cozy space for reading and needlework, and every time they immersed themselves in their studies, they felt that their lives had become even more intense and fulfilling. They enjoyed their solitude together, knowing that now their home is not just a place to live, but also an expression of their common history, their love and inner peace. Inspired by their life together, Linda and James decided to do charity work, helping a local animal shelter. Now they visited the shelter every week, brought food and toys for the animals, and sometimes even took them home for overexposure to help them find new owners. This activity filled their lives with new meaning and gave them the opportunity to give their love and care to those who needed help. James and Linda felt that together they could not only find peace, but also bring goodness to the world, and this strengthened their bond even more. When they went on a short trip to the sea to celebrate another year of their life together, Linda realized that their relationship had become much deeper and stronger than she could ever have imagined. Now they enjoyed every moment they spent together, whether it was walking along the beach, quiet evenings around the campfire, or just talking about life. They both knew that their love had withstood difficult trials and that now they could truly enjoy their happiness without looking back or fearing the future. In their life together, the peace and quiet that had been inaccessible to them for so long appeared. Now Linda looked at James and saw in him not just a man with whom she shared her life, but someone who was always there for her, supported her, and accepted her for who she was. James, in turn, found a source of strength and inspiration in Linda, and now every day he thanked fate that they were able to overcome all difficulties and preserve their feelings. As the years passed, their love only grew stronger. Now their house was full not only of their shared memories, but also of the little details they added to make it truly their own. Linda and James continued to take care of the garden, enjoying the results of their work, and their house was always filled with fresh flowers and the scent of herbs. These symbols of their journey together reminded them that their love is not just an instant feeling, but the result of a long and painstaking work that they were both willing to continue for each other. Linda was no longer afraid of the future and did not look back at her past. Now she was living in the present, enjoying every day she spent with James. Her worries, her fears and doubts were left behind, giving way to calmness and confidence that her life had finally found true meaning. James found in Linda not only a partner, but also a true friend who helped him find inner peace and taught him to appreciate simple joys. Their love had become a source of inspiration and confidence for him, and now he knew that their happiness was something they had created together and that no one could destroy. On quiet evenings, sitting on the terrace of their house and watching the stars, Linda and James felt that their lives were full and complete. Their story, which had gone through trials and doubts, had found its purpose and completion, and now they could look to the future with confidence, knowing that no matter how their lives turned out, they would always be there for each other, supporting, understanding and loving.